Record. So yeah, so I'm definitely more on the risk side. I prefer to be excited, engaged, and find adventure. And you'll hear more about that. And it's served me really well. I've created an incredibly happy life through taking risks. And I'm sure there are some of you who are like that and others who are not. So if I hadn't taken a risk and hitchhiked around Europe in 1979, I wouldn't be settling in a town called London where I knew no one, and I wouldn't be living here, and I wouldn't have created the life I had. If I hadn't taken the risk of getting up on stage in front of people and doing an auditions and putting myself outside my comfort zone, I wouldn't have become a singer and had the opportunity to tour around the world and do lots of exciting things. If I hadn't retrained as a teacher at the age of 40, which is pretty late for most people, and followed my passion to help deaf people, I wouldn't have become a teacher of the deaf. Now, most people wouldn't say training to be a teacher is risky, but when you decide to change career at 40, it kind of feels like it. And if I hadn't thought that I could help people, I wouldn't have been a coach. That was even riskier, because where do you get your clients from? How do you know it's going to work? If I hadn't paid a lot of money to be a trainer, I wouldn't be earning 4 times this year what I earned last year. So these are all about, and I had to let go of my day job. So I'm using these as examples, and later on, I'm going to ask you to think about where you've taken risks in your life and how that served you, and where you haven't and how it's limited you. So as you can probably gather, I'm a big advocate of stepping outside your comfort zone. And I absolutely believe that that's where growth happens, is outside your comfort zone. So Tony Robbins, who's a personal development coach, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, talks about the 6 human needs. And they are variety, certainty, significance, connection, growth, and contribution. But the 2 I want to talk about right here are variety and certainty. And as I said, everyone is somewhere on that continuum, and you might find that you lurch from one to the other. You want certainty, but then you get tired, you get bored, you need something else. So you go towards variety, which is where risk lies. Because if you want to switch it up, you're going to take a risk. You're going to have to let go of certainty. So you can't really be doing both at the same time. So as I said earlier, I became a teacher of the deaf. And what I found was being confined by the rules of the local authority, the public sector, it prevented me from truly helping people. And you know, that now where I am now, I get to choose what I want to do, but I had to let go of that. I had to let go of being paid 12 months a year and always knowing the paycheck would be the same every month, again and again and again. So if you happen to work for the public sector and you really love it, and if you can put up with a lot of what I would call senseless bureaucracy, I sincerely applaud you. I do. But that wasn't my thing. Or if you work for a big corporation and you prefer the security and perhaps even the money, again, I applaud you. I would only ask you to question whether you are in alignment with your core values. And this is where some of the problem is. If security is a higher value than freedom, you're in the right place. In that stable, steady environment. If you've worked at your whole life at a job because you're scared to leave, that's great, that's fine. It shows where you are on the continuum. So this is about bringing into your awareness where you are with that. There's actually a Twitter feed, which if you don't like swearing, close your ears, but there's a Twitter feed called "Fuck You, I Quit." And some will say, and I was reading the feed today, and some would say that leaving a job you hate is an absence of tenacity, is the inability to stick to something. And in some cases that may be true. But what about, I'm going to just propose it to you, what about if you only made aligned choices and did choose who you want to work with and what you do. And what if it worked? What if it worked? Because if you're only considering what if it doesn't work, you're severely limiting yourself. This also applies in the realm of relationships. So if I hadn't gone on that one internet date, by the way, with a feeling of total dread, I thought, I'm just going to meet another idiot. This is going to be really boring. I'm going to be really embarrassed. I'm going to have to walk away, tell the guy I don't like him. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have met the really cool guy I'm with now. And to make matters even more complicated, he's moving to the States. And so someone will say to me, but well, why are you getting involved with someone who's moving to another country? It's risky because no one knows what the future will hold. So the naysayers will always say things like, what if he meets someone else? Or, well, you can't do a long distance relationship. Or what if it doesn't work? And so on and so on and so on. And of course, there's always the potential that something won't work, whether it's in the realms of your relationships or the realms of your career, or whatever it is, or moving countries, for example. But what if it does? Even my mother's on my case, so do I close the door because it's risky? Some people would think, yeah, okay, so forget it, it's not going to work. But I just think, okay, I work online, it doesn't matter. I'll spend a month there and a month elsewhere and so on, and I'll make it up as I go along, because I'm so accustomed to taking those kinds of radical actions, switching from being a singer to being a teacher, to being a coach, to moving country, to spending a month in Spain last year because I couldn't stand the weather. So everyone has, if you choose to make these kinds of choices, you can. Here's the thing, nothing is perfect, or arguably everything is perfect. And if you never explore possibilities and you're always playing safe, life will be safer, but it might be duller. And that's a choice that you have to balance up. It's very personal. So I think that life is made up of seemingly small risks. And I'm making the case for risk taking, or playing at your edges, as someone called it. So, doing what's uncomfortable all the time. And I really like that. It's really made my life joyful, vibrant, fun, adventurous. So I want to quote Peter Sage, whose courses I facilitate. And he says, the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably handle. I think that's pretty cool. And I'm going to repeat it. The quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably handle. Now, this quote is not to suggest that you have to take huge risks to have a high quality of life, but it does suggest a kind of adaptability, which I feel can only be won by challenging yourself, by embracing uncertainty, by embracing stepping outside your comfort zone. So that's how you grow your adaptability, by stepping outside your comfort zone. And I'm not suggesting either that you abandon due diligence in your pursuit of risk taking. That's just laziness, right? So you assess things, you don't suddenly lose your mind and go out and do a bunch of stuff. But if your heart's telling you to do something and you stop yourself because it might go wrong, what if it does go wrong? Is that such a bad thing? You can see that that's the line I pursue. And I'm really, really welcome your pushback on this. I really do. But the next time you say, I can't do something, I can't, I do want you to challenge yourself to answer this question. Is it because you can't, or because you choose not to take the risk? Recently on a course, I was, this is just a real digression, but I was offered to go paragliding. I said, sure, yeah, I'll do that. And I realized as I went to do it that I barely had any fear because I'm so used to challenging myself that it's grown my capacity. It's kind of hard for me to feel fear of things like that. So it's always about this pushing, pushing, pushing outside your comfort zone so that you grow your capacity. So look, let's look at the other end of the continuum, risk aversion. And I will tell you, my ex is a great guy, but he was risk averse by his own admission. And you might argue that it's good to have a balance. You know, Corey's the risk taker and ex-husband is the risk averse guy. But actually, in our case, I eventually found the limitations of that too frustrating. I'm a creative, I'm a singer, I'm an artist. And if I had stayed, I would have carried on limiting my life, being a teacher, hating it, being happy, and being unfulfilled, because that didn't fit into someone else's worldview, and I didn't fit into his. And this worked out really well. We've both met people who are much more in line with our way of thinking. So for me, one of the defining moments was when I summoned the courage to leave. And it was scary, the knowledge that I would have to make my own way in the world after being essentially looked after for 20 years. That was the nature of my marriage. This is the trade-off. You trade what you want to do and your freedom and your way of life for being taken care of. And it was the risk aversion that caused me to stay for probably 10 years longer than I should have. And I question if you're staying in a place that you don't like because you're risk averse. I will encourage you to really look at that. It's one of the remits of this talk tonight. And again, please don't misconstrue my words. He's a great guy. There's nothing wrong with him, but we're a very bad fit despite years of trying to fix our relationship. It just wasn't, it was not. It's a way of thinking and a way of being, which often people call entrepreneurial, right? So it's a way of looking at life and a way of looking at the world, seeing challenges as opportunities, always opportunities for growth. But what I will tell you is that leaving my marriage was without a doubt one of the scariest decisions I've ever made. And yet here I am 8 years later, living my best life at the age of 65. So I've got to ask myself, I forgive myself for not doing it sooner, but at the same time, I wonder what my life would have been had I not done that, had I not stayed that long. So, you know, of course, it's never too late, but it's really good to think about these things from time to time. So I know that everything I'm saying is anecdotal. It's my life. I have no evidence, but I want to ask you this. Where do you think many of the successful people of this world would be if they hadn't taken risks? Maybe you want a peaceful life. Maybe you don't need to be Elon Musk or Richard Branson, and that's fine. But I have to ask you, is it because you just want a quiet life, or is it because you're afraid of failure? That's the question. So what I'd like to do with you now, and it's just a 5-minute thing, and I'm going to hit the pause button, is I want you to list the times you did decide to take a risk and it played out well. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to, do this on your own for 5 minutes, and then we can revisit it. So I'm going to press the pause button so nobody has to, how do I do this? Yeah, get out your pen and paper. The times that you did decide to take a risk and it turned out well. Or if you're in the middle of a risk, because I know that there are some of you on this call who are going through massive transitions, I'd be really curious to know what you think the future holds in terms of excitement. I'm not naming any names. I saw that smile. So thank you everyone for your contributions. So look, either way, whether you stay where you are or whether you change, there is the potential for pain. Whether you stay in your situation and just keep things safe, there's the pain of regret of things you didn't try, or you know, if you risk and you fall flat on your face, there's the pain of failure. But I'm going to propose to you that there's nothing more fulfilling than growth and contribution. Of the 6 human needs, Tony Robbins said that to have a really happy life, those are the 2 that really count: growth and contribution. And without risk, there is no growth. So what have you got to lose, right? So I've got 4 little, it was really weird because I was in the bathroom today and I was just picked up this book and it was about coaching. And it so happened that I opened to this chapter and it was about mastering change. And there was a tiny little to-do list about becoming your best self. And this was all about deliberately pursuing change. And I equate the 2. I see the 2 as 2 sides of the same coin. You know, risk taking is where the growth and the change happens. So here are the 4 things he suggested. The first was shake up your routine. This is a really easy one. If you usually sit in one spot at the table, sit at another spot, be willing to try ideas that you have rejected in the past, be willing to open up to new perspectives. And I think that was what we discussed last week. I think we talked about negotiating differences, which is kind of a fun topic. Or was that the week before? That was the week before. Last week was about confidence. These 2 things, risk-taking and confidence, are very closely related, aren't they? So number 2 is mentally rehearse alternative responses to problems you'd like to handle better. So if you're going to do something like go for a job interview, my face went like that because I was thinking, go on an internet date. You know, if you want to have your rejection speech ready, you could mentally rehearse that. You know, anything that you feel uncomfortable with. One of the things that Peter Sage talks about, which is fabulous, is when you have something really important to do, run the movie through in your mind before you do it and visualize yourself going through the whole thing so that when you are in a new situation, you are prepared, right? That's number 2. Number 3 is adopt a nothing to lose attitude. What have I got to lose? I might be embarrassed. I might be ashamed. You might lose money. You might be lose face. But at the end of the day, so what is what I'm going to say. So what? And then the other was befriend uncertainty. And he says, in order to get closer to realizing your potential, befriend the uncertainty and make a habit of pursuing change whenever opportunity arises. So I thought that was a kind of cool coincidence that came up today, that I was reading that, because I think it's very relevant. So look, I want to say to you that I also do a lot of work with clients where they're afraid to invest in their own growth. People say it's too risky to spend money on yourself in that way. And always people will say it's about the money. Often, not always, 90% of the time it's about money. But in truth, it's about whether they can bet on themselves. Because if you knew that by investing in your growth, you would definitely more than recoup it, would you do it? And aren't you going to spend that money anyway? So I know it sounds like I'm doing a big sales pitch, but I'm telling you, this literally is what I encounter in my day job as a success coach. So is it better to buy a car or a new coach if you're thinking you want to move forward in your life? Of course, it depends where you're at in your life. Do you think your new attitude or your new car is going to take you further? Do you believe that personal growth is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself? Because I do. In fact, I know that to the core of my being, and I've proved it in my own life, but of course that's subjective. Or maybe when you're looking at investing in a program, you're thinking, well, there might be a flaw with the program, or there might be a flaw with the coach. Or do you think you have a part to play? this is all about your belief in you and your ability to engage in something and make it work. So often we say, is that thing going to work? When really it's about, are you going to make it work? Are you going to take the decision to take risks? Are you going to take the decision to do something uncomfortable? And then are you going to make it work? Because that's down to you. So my personal belief, which has served me, as I said, immeasurably, is to invest in myself every time. And boy, oh boy, I'm really glad I validated that in my own life. So that may be for you, or it may not be. If you want to talk one-to-one about what's on offer and what's available, then please do. And now I would like to open the floor to questions. So I'm going to press pause. So thank you so much for attending. I've really enjoyed it. I've loved hearing your contributions. It's been amazing. And yeah, another fun evening as far as I'm concerned. So by all means, if you have any questions, let me just stop the recording now. Recording